Vikings heading to London tonight to play the New Orleans Saints. We are all in on Vikings-Saints mode now here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. And you know what that means? Crossover Thursday with Locked On Saints. Me and Ross Jackson. Let's get into it. Ooh-wee!
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome, Vikings fans. Welcome, Saints fans, to Crossover Thursday on the Locked On Vikings and Locked On Saints podcast. Talking to a guy I never get to talk to anymore. It's not
No,
like we do a podcast together. We never get to talk specifically on Monday nights after Monday Night Football. It's Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints. I'm Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings. You can catch us on Tuesdays on the Locked On NFL podcast as well. This is definitely going to be my favorite crossover of the year. Sorry, everybody else.
I'm with you, man. I'm with you. I'm glad to
yeah.
be here with you to be able to knock this out.
So Vikings
Especially because we get to
Saints-
do it like kind of overseas-ish.
Overseas-ish. Yes, it is a London game. Vikings Saints in London. One of the premier events of the season for both teams, probably. I mean, this is like they make a huge deal out of this, going overseas, international audience and all of that. You are in London, we speak. I will be soon. That's very fun. And what's also fun is your trip to London started way earlier, and I am leaving way later, which mirrors our respective teams. And this is one of the most interesting things about this game to me. The Saints left Sunday night after their game against the Carolina Panthers, and the Vikings aren't leaving until Thursday night. They will have been in London for like 36 hours when they play. Whole big deal made out of it in Vikings media about like the sports science of that, the sleep science of that, and how a shorter trip is preferable to a longer one. Is Tyler Williams, I think his name is our head one of our head athletic guys, and he basically insists, he's done a bunch of these London trips. He insists that short is better. The Saints seem to disagree. I'm fascinated by this. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one. I mean, the New Orleans Saints are a team that, they're undefeated overseas, and every single time this is what they've done. They've gone out early on in the week, like right after the previous week's game or a day or two after the previous week's game, and then have kind of had the longer trip leading up to the matchup. And so that's worked for them. What is better or worse in terms of like a sports science stuff, that's gonna be kind of based upon whatever works for each team, I guess. But for the
way
New Orleans
deeper
Saints,
conversation.
yeah, right. Like the for the Saints though, like the longer trip has proven to be more beneficial for them in the past. So I don't blame, or I'm not surprised to see Dennis Allen sticking with Sean Payton's approach here.
Yeah, and also the Vikings are also undefeated overseas, 2-0, less than the Saints. So somebody will experience their first loss. By the way, today's Crossover Thursday is brought to you by presented by friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is a ton of fun, easy to play. Just pick 2 to 5 players and whether they'll get more or less than their Prize Picks projection. Jameis Winston, more or less than, say, 5 interceptions. You can get all sorts of plays like that and put your thing together. You could make like 10 times your money. And if you go right now, enter promo code LOCKEDON at prizepicks.com, or you can get the app. Promo code LOCKEDON gets you 100% deposit match up to $100. So you put in $100, you get $100 more on top of that. Put in 50, get 50, and so on. That's prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON, or just go to the Prize Picks app. So other key stories, I guess, for this game, like the major headlines. Is the Saints offense okay? Or is this a cry for help? Do we need to send somebody to their home to check on what is going on? What is like 12 points per game in the last 2 games? What in the world?
New Orleans Saints offense, if you're in trouble, wear a yellow in your next video. It's one of those like weird situations. It's like one of those weird situations where like everyone kind of expected it, myself included, this New Orleans offense to just be like incredible coming into the season. And last week, in the loss against the Carolina Panthers, the New Orleans Saints quarterback Jameis Winston threw for more than 300 passing yards for his first time as a starter for the New Orleans Saints. That actually hadn't happened in his 5-2 start last year. It hadn't happened over the course of this stuff. So, and he's thrown, 40 plus, 35 plus times over the course of the past 2 weeks as well.
Saints offense,
and
historically good.
Yeah, right. And so like it's so vastly not what anyone expected this New Orleans Saints offense to be. And that is easily the biggest story for the New Orleans Saints going into this game is can the New Orleans Saints find life in their offense? There were some signs of life in it. They had a dagger concept that worked really well, which Luke, is like the basic of all basics when it comes to
Sure.
taking a deep
Everybody's
shot
got
in these
that.
kind of right in these like West Coast Air Coryell blend offenses. And so there are some things that have proven to be kind of like the old faithfuls, if you will, like those dagger concepts that have worked for them over the course of the past couple of weeks. But outside of that, not a lot has been able to get going for them. And some of it has been Jameis Winston passing on, plays that are right there in front of him, 3 yards here, 5 yards there, 6 yards there in favor of the deeper pass, which is something we didn't see him do last year. Some of it has been kind of game plan stuff. Like for instance, the Saints 6 times last week throwing incompletions on first down and then running on 2nd and 10. Never a good formula. So there's some things that just kind of like haven't really gotten going for the Saints at all over on the offensive side, particularly through, I think I'll say, 8, 9, 10, 11 quarters, right? And so really the only time that we've seen the Saints offense click is the fourth quarter in the opening game against the Atlanta Falcons. So can they get it going
Yeah.
at the beginning and early on and find their rhythm finally here in London against the Minnesota Vikings? We'll see.
And so here's what I've been saying. The Vikings defense is in a really weird spot right now. There's a lot of new going on, a lot of miscommunications. They're busting coverages left and right. They're failing with like zone pass offs and pickups. They're slow on it, so there's space. This is absolutely the kind of unit you can have a get right game against. This is the stoppable force versus movable object thing that I think will define this game. Is which one of these units can get its poop in a group? Like, which one of these units can figure it out?
Right.
Because as much as Jameis, and you'll have to tell me why Jameis Winston's having these. We'll talk about it soon too, because there's a matchup thing I want to talk about. But like, can the Vikings actually take advantage of the mistakes that lead to Jameis Winston throwing interceptions, or will he get away with those things and just be able to throw in soft spots and zones all day, like Jared Goff did, like Jalen Hurts did? That like teams can move the ball against these guys. I think that's the headline of this: is which one of these ailing units can figure its business out.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll tell you, you mentioned a get right game the New Orleans Saints absolutely needed. I thought last week against the Carolina Panthers was going to be that get right game, very clearly was not, and so they can
Weird
absolutely use that here. I know it was such a
Yeah,
strange one,
like a
and so
catastrophic
they could use
start,
it.
and then you just
Yeah, it
you
did
just come
not go
behind it all
well.
day.
So they're going to be looking for that kind of rebound game here. Maybe they're going to be the better rested of the two units as well with coming out here a little bit earlier. Maybe they won't be, depending
Maybe
on
it
the
won't be.
sports
Yeah,
science
it's
part of it. Yeah,
fascinating.
like it'll be really interesting to see. But if they can go ahead and catch a rhythm early, and that'll certainly give them an opportunity to finally be able to build on what we haven't been able to see them build on the offensive side so far this season.
Right. So if you go to Bet Online, Saints over under for scoring right now is 20.5. So 21 points, 3 touchdowns, and they would hit that over. The Vikings have given that up in the last 2 games to the Eagles, who are very good, and then like a Jared Goff and rushing offense. So I don't know. Interesting bet. If you want to bet on that or any other sort of prop bet stuff, you can find all that at betonline.net. It's your one-stop shop for all things betting on sports. You can bet on that. The line for this game is Vikings by 2.5. So if you think the Saints will win, say 27-24 or something, go ahead and bet that. Go to Bet Online to find odds for everything. Baseball playoffs coming up, golf, tennis, whatever else is in season this time of year. We're getting to like one of the most high octane sports months of the year, which is October.
Yeah.
So go check all of that stuff out at betonline.net. You can do player props. You can bet live in the middle of games, build wacky parlays, all sorts of things. Once again, that's betonline.net, where the game starts. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings and or Locked On Saints your first listen of the day. Welcoming in Vikings fans and Saints fans for this crossover Thursday, brought to you by prizepicks.com. Let's talk about some key matchups. I alluded to one: Jameis Winston and Harrison Smith. So Harrison Smith had a concussion. He missed the game against the Lions. He was a full participant in practice on Wednesday. I assume that means he'll be back. So He'll be back, and the Vikings have been using him as a trick safety is the word they use for it, or a poach safety you might have heard. Line up on one side of the field, and if there's a deep crosser or something, try to go pick it off. Basically, lurk. Literally, sometimes the word is like lurk. Lie in wait in the shadows, try to pick off Jameis Winston. Can Jameis Winston avoid this particular pitfall?
Yeah, it's going to be a big one because that's going to be something that they haven't seen so far in terms of a defensive look that will kind of be new for them going into this season, or throughout this season in the early goings. And so that's going to be a different sort of scheme that the New Orleans Saints offense and Jameis Winston are going to have to face here. Now, Jameis Winston did not participate in practice on Wednesday, but the expectation is that he will play on Sunday. Head coach Dennis Allen saying that he does not expect there to be any type of like concern about him getting out there. Keep in mind, he's also dealing with 4 fractures in his back right now. He's far removed from an ankle injury, and he's still less than a year removed from the ACL injury that ended his season last year, which happened on Halloween Day. So we're not even to that point yet. We're not even into October yet. And so we will be by the time we get to the game, but as of this conversation.
Still, yeah.
And so, yeah. And so for New Orleans, like if you're seeing a different and a new look like that, particularly if the Minnesota Vikings front seven is able to get some pressure on Jameis Winston, because the Saints have really, really struggled, and this is kind of the big matchup that I'm watching, is kind of the trenches matchup here for the Saints versus that Minnesota Vikings defensive front and really front seven, because the Saints have had some struggles identifying blitzes, where they're coming from, who the pressure players are, things like that. We've seen a lot of situations to where opposing teams will have 2 players sugaring a gap, whether it be the A gap or the B gap in between the guard and center or between the guard and tackle. And they'll expect the inside player to be the one that's coming in and bringing the pressure. That player drops back into coverage. The offensive line moves on with its reads. The outside player comes in completely untouched and ends up getting right after Jameis Winston.
Classic
And if Jameis
Mike
comes
Zimmer.
Yeah. And so if Jameis comes out of that and then tries to get the ball out quickly, which is something that the Saints have really started to do, they started to kind of pick up the pace later in that game against the Carolina Panthers. If they start to do that and he makes a read too quickly or doesn't see Harrison Smith kind of lurking underneath, then that could end up opening up opportunities there for the veteran safety, who is still so dang good, by the way. Like, regardless of how long this guy's been in the NFL, he's aging like a fine wine. And as they continue to refine sort of his role, it is something that will be unique that Jameis Winston and New Orleans Saints offense haven't seen yet. Another big matchup that I'm going to be watching is, of course, going to be Marshawn Lattimore and Justin Jefferson. This is marquee. This is marquee stuff right here.
This is primetime football, right?
Yeah. Marshawn did a phenomenal job against DJ Moore, one of the more underrated wide receivers in the NFL. Now, of course, he's got Baker Mayfield throwing to him, so that wasn't doing him much favor at all. But he's also had some good matchups against Kyle Pitts, against Drake London. Really good matchup with Mike Evans in week 2 until they were both ejected for fighting. I don't think you're going to see any fighting between Marshawn Lattimore and Justin Jefferson. They both seem like pretty even keel people. So I think that the fight between the two of them is really just the back and forth that will happen on the football field. I know Justin Jefferson struggled a little bit here early on in the season, or at least recently. But I expect that the Minnesota Vikings are going to want to get him involved in this game. And so the battle between he and Marshawn Lattimore should be a lot of fun to watch.
So here's what's interesting about that.
Yeah.
I don't know if the Vikings will allow that to be a matchup. They don't want that to be a matchup, unless you're going to shadow. Like, if you're going to shadow, go for it. But if the Saints,
which Marshawn Lattimore doesn't do very often, by the way.
Does he play in the slot at all? Because then they'll just line up Jefferson in the slot all day and then try to get him to cross over the field and see if he can get him open that way.
So it'll be interesting if they start him out wide and then motion him into the slot. If it's man-to-man coverage, then Marshawn will follow him into the slot. But if he comes out in the slot, then it's unlikely they're going to get a matchup between he and Marshawn Lattimore. Like, they can scheme him away from Lattimore if they want to.
They probably will want to. That's what they've been trying to do, is move Jefferson around the formation, get him on favorable matchups, and not necessarily just sit there and be okay with the marquee 1v1. That said, the Lions did shadow. They had, and so the Saints might see that, and then they see, well, Justin Jefferson got less than 50 yards the last 2 games, and both these guys have been like kind of playing him really tough physical press and have a safety over the top of him, which will take away just about anybody. And essentially leaving everybody else one-on-one across the board. So you'll have Adam Thielen one-on-one, KJ Osborne one-on-one, Irv Smith one-on-one. And can everybody else on the team keep up with that? It might not even be Lattimore. You might have, who's the other corner?
Well, if Paulson Adebo is healthy, then you could see
Okay,
him get up there. He was kind of playing a bit of a snap count last week. But then
gotcha.
Bradley Roby would be the other
Bradley
guy to
Roby.
watch there for sure.
Yeah. So you might have Bradley Roby playing underneath Justin Jefferson with a safety over top, Marshawn Lattimore
Hmm.
on Adam Thielen. That might be the way the Saints want to play this. So very Belichickian.
Yep.
That so I'll be curious to see how that matches up, but I'm sure we'll get some level of snaps, and I'm sure every time the broadcast will focus right in on it and go, there it is. We got Justin Jefferson on Marshawn Lattimore. Watch it. Um, you love to see that kind of thing, right? Elite on elite,
Yeah.
strength on strength. My question for just about every one of these crossovers: how is your
Mhm.
interior pass rush? This is where the Vikings have been weak for about 14 years now. Interior pass rush, interior pressure. They got a rookie at right guard in Ed Ingram.
Mhm.
Ezra Cleveland has been good but inconsistent. Garrett Bradbury's been inconsistent. There is an opening there. Do you have the sort of pass rushing Fletcher Cox type defensive tackle that can come like make some noise?
I wouldn't say that they have one that's consistent enough. They have the talent with David Onyemata, who, when he is on, can be one of the better defensive tackles in the NFL, but he hasn't been a disruptive player so far this offseason. And really, the pass rush, which is 32nd in the NFL, according to ESPN's pass rush win rate right now, just
Wow.
atrocious so far. And Luke, when I say 32nd, I mean 32nd. I mean they are last. Like their
Wow.
win
We
rate
might
is
be
about
close.
well, their win rate's about 19% in 32nd place. 31st place is the New England Patriots at 30%. It's an
Oh my God.
11% gap. Yeah, it's bad. It's
What is
bad,
wrong
bad.
with the Saints? I thought they would
It's
come out
rough.
like I don't think I had the Saints as like a fringe playoff team going in.
Same.
Like about where the Vikings were. Like, hey, maybe they can sneak in a wild card, but that division belongs to someone else. What is going on?
Yeah.
Is Dennis
Yeah.
Allen
It's
bad or is this just new coach stuff?
I there's a bunch of different stuff that's going on, and particularly over on the offensive side. But the thing that is most surprising to me is the lack of pass rush. Now there are a couple of things, right? You went up against Marcus Mariota, where you're not really trying to get pressure, you're trying to contain. You went up
Hmm.
against Tom Brady to start, where you're not going to blitz, you're not really going to get a lot of pressure because he gets the ball out so quickly. Those things might have impacted the numbers, but Luke, 19% pass rush win rate.
That's
That's a different issue.
unreal.
That's a different problem. Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
are they able to
So
manufacture pressure with like blitzes and stuff? Because here's the other thing: the Vikings blitz counters are super broken right now.
okay, that might work in the Saints' favor. They saw some signs of life there against the Carolina Panthers last week. Demario Davis, Pete Werner getting into the backfield, JT Gray, safety blitzes getting into the backfield as well. Marcus May, their starting strong safety, was out for that game. Looks like he might be back for this game. He was off working to the side on Wednesday, so we'll see how he progresses during the practice week. But they were able to kind of manufacture a little bit more of a supplemental blitz by adding or supplemental pass rush by adding some of the blitz looks there and different sort of pressure plays and things like that. So maybe they might be able to take advantage of Minnesota's struggles there. But so far, it has been a concern in New Orleans for sure.
That's this is fast. This is such a fascinating game because it does feel like it's coming down to the team's weaknesses more than the team's strengths on both sides of the
Yep.
ball. Like it just feels like the way it matches up, it's who can fix their problems while also going internationally and going across and like also get healthy. Like who can fix problems rather than who can leverage their strengths, which I feel like is rare.
Yeah. Yeah, especially for teams that you usually expect to be playoff teams like these two
Right.
teams here, the Minnesota
Yeah.
Vikings and the New Orleans Saints. Like usually you're
Or at
trying to
least in
figure
it,
out,
you know.
okay, who can who, like in the conversation here, who can outstrength who? Whereas instead
Yeah.
it's like in this game, it's gonna simply be about which team makes the least amount of mistakes and capitalizes on the mistakes that are being made by the other team. So we'll see which way
Yeah.
it all goes with it. Um, Luke, speaking of making mistakes, we're gonna come back here in just a sec to talk a little bit and break down our predictions for how we think this game is gonna go and kind of recap everything. And I'm gonna go a little bit of a direction that I haven't gone when it comes to the New Orleans
Oh,
Saints here
a
in a
tease.
little bit. But yes, but first, speaking of making mistakes, I don't know if you've seen some of these like viral videos of these proposals gone wrong, but there are a lot of people who aren't doing this right. Simply are not doing this right. Proposing on docks and dropping rings within the slats of the dock, and it falls into the literal ocean, which means you're not getting that. You're not getting that ring
Nope.
back. People proposing in like the 600 sections of football stadiums and dropping that ring. Imagine proposing like at an Arsenal game here in London, and like dropping the ring in that crowd, right? Just
Yeah.
the end of your world at that point.
Yep.
So that's why I love our friends over at Brightco, who give you sort of free custom jewelry insurance, and you can get a nice and easy quote with them. You're not going to find insurance for your watch, for your engagement ring, for any of your prized possessions in jewelry that's cheaper, that's faster, and that is more secure than what you're going to find at Brightco. So I highly, highly recommend going over to bright.co / locked on so that you could check out everything that they have for you over there. You can even watch some of these videos, these like viral videos of people just completely screwing up their proposals and stuff like that. So, proposals are always a little nerve wracking, but if you want to make sure you have the confidence that you need, make sure that you are getting the insurance on the other side, just in case you drop that ring into the ocean. You don't want that to be the case. So head over to bright.co / locked on today to check out and get your free quote on your jewelry insurance and your price for free.
And that's spelled BRITE.co
Yes.
/ locked on,
Yes.
by the way. Important. Not like that word is usually spelled. All right, let's start putting some money where our mouths are. So,
All right.
once again, Bet Online spread for this one, Vikings by 2.5. Over under is, as I look at it right now, 42.5. So that implies something like a 23-20 Viking victory. That would be Vegas chalk. Where are you going compared to that?
I am going under in this game.
Under.
I think that this is going to end up being more like a 20-10 kind of a situation, maybe even like a 20-15, 20-14 kind of situation.
20-15.
And
do a weird one. It's London.
Yeah, let's do a weird one. Let's do a scoreagami, right? 20. Yeah. I know 20-15 won't be a scoreagami, but it'll feel like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like some kind of weird situation here, and I think the Saints lose their first international game in this one. I want to believe in the New Orleans Saints, but based upon what we've seen from them for 3 weeks, based upon their sort of the challenges that they've had and where those challenges are: pass rush, protection, scoring, finishing drives on the offensive side. Special teams is now even a concern for this team. Not punt blocks, field goal blocks, missing field goals. They missed a field goal in each of their 3 games so far this season. Punt coverage is not what you expect it to be. The kick return game isn't doing very well. Injuries all over this team as well. I have a hard time buying in and saying, okay, we're going to see an improvement from this team. I'll believe it when I see it at this point. And for me right now, the New Orleans Saints are not the team that can go to Europe and win when they can't win in their own stadium right now. It can't win in their own division right now, going 1-2 over their 3 division games that open up the season. I can't pick the Saints going into this one with full confidence. I really can't.
You sound exactly like me in pick your November slump. The Vikings are
November
falling below 500. Pick I'll believe it when I see it. I think I say that all the time when the Vikings are slumping. So I feel you. I think there's going to be more scoring in this one. I do think the Saints can figure something out on offense, specifically because the Vikings make a lot of mistakes that make it so that you don't have to win matchups anymore. They just bust a coverage, and it doesn't matter who that guy is. Anybody can streak open on a busted coverage, right?
Yeah.
So I am going to say I have a gambling segment for Fridays on Locked On Vikings, and one of them that I'm going to do is the Saints over on their point total of over 20.5. So I'm going to say the Saints score a little more. I'm going to go over on the total. That said, the Saints do have a lot of mistakes in them. And there is something, they're in quite the funk. I think they can get out of it offensively, but I also think that the Vikings are on the right track. The way that Kevin O'Connell has the team going, the way that they're working, the way that they're improving, they are getting a little better at stuff every week. Problems aren't getting worse. They're not going away because the problems they have with communication is pretty big, and it's a lot of work to get rid of that. That's not the kind of thing that goes away in 1 week, but it's improving. And so I can feel a little bit better about expecting, hey, they're not going to be world beaters all of a sudden, but they can get a little better than they were against Philly, against Detroit. And they did. And I think they can get a little better in this one than they did against Detroit. So it's not going to be a, over 52 kind of game, but I'm going to go something like a 24-28. That was exactly the score. Screw it. Yep. They're going to get the same exact score 2 weeks in a row. 24-28, 28-24 Vikings. Yep.
I like it.
Vikings cover and the over. Let's go. I'm a homer now.
And that would be like honestly, if the Saints lost the game like that, 28-24, while traveling, while dealing with all the injuries, like, is Michael Thomas going to play? Is he not going to play? That's something to watch. How is Jameis Winston going to battle through these injuries? That's something to watch. But if they can go out there overseas and score 24 points, even if they lose, I'll feel better about them. It's not unusual to see the Saints start slow in September. That's not fully unusual for them. So like that would at least be some momentum to build on. But you can't take any of these moral victories along the way when you're dropping games, you know what I mean, and things like that. So
fair enough.
Yeah.
So here's the thing: the Vikings love to lighten the box. I think they still lead the league in like lightest boxes, fewest guys in the box. They will let you run. That's fine because they'll have 2 safeties on the roof and it makes it harder to pass. But then they screw up the zone coverage so you can pass and you can run. And that's kind of what's been happening on defense. So I guess the final question, and I think it really comes down to this, at least on that side of the ball. Can Jameis Winston throw on zone? Because they live in zone match right now. They will only go to man in like certain situations. They live too high, cover 6 or cover 8, quarter, half, whatever you want to call it. Can Jameis Winston throw on zone? Or does that come down to if Michael Thomas is there? Or like, will he be able to throw on zone in this one?
He has shown that he can in the past. What the New Orleans Saints need to do, and this is what I think they should do going into this game, is stop working high to low and start working low to high. Take what the defense is giving you. And if they start taking what the defense is giving you and they utilize Alvin Kamara a little bit more in the passing game, who's got like 19 receiving yards coming into this game on the season, which is completely un-Alvin Kamara-like. Even though he's only played 2 out of the 3 games, but still 19 receiving yards is kind of inexcusable with one of the most explosive players in the NFL. So if you start taking what's available to you, you start utilizing Michael Thomas closer to the line of scrimmage, start utilizing Jarvis Landry closer to the line of scrimmage, the tight ends, Alvin Kamara close to the line of scrimmage, then yes. But if they keep working high to low, then they're going to continue to run into issues.
Gotcha. Do you see that big do you see them making that big sweeping change right now with all the offensive issues? Is now the time to hit the mute button?
I sure hope so. I sure hope so. That to me, like, that's what they need to do. To me, that's the situation that they need to be in. So like when we go back and we look at, the biggest story for these 2 teams, the New Orleans Saints coming in with, the longer trip, being in London a little bit longer.
The sleep thing will be fascinating.
Right. Yeah.
If one team gets blown out because they came out flat, it's all we'll talk about.
That's it. Yeah, exactly right. And so like if they want to justify the early travel, which, like their past justifies it a little bit, but then that means that like them coming in and making an adjustment like that, because they had their full sort of 3 days of practice without interrupting that, they should be able to make that kind of big adjustment. The next thing is kind of what we discussed in terms of the other biggest story for the New Orleans Saints in particular is, are they going to be able to get their offense right? I think working low to high will certainly help them be able to do that, right? And then some of those matchups that we discussed, like, Jameis Winston versus Harrison Smith, being able to take advantage of what the defense is giving you elsewhere, that would certainly, help to lighten all that up. And maybe that helps you get into a situation where the New Orleans Saints defense is able to do enough to kind of, get the ball back into your hands so that you can start to chew clock, things like that, work low to high, take what the defense is giving you and all that. But we have to see them do that. That's the thing, is we have to see them do it.
Yeah. A lot of guys with a lot to prove here on Vikings-Saints here on the Locked On Podcast Network. So thank you, Ross. Thank you, Saints fans. Vikings fans, go listen to Locked On Saints. Go listen to Ross. Listen to us on Locked On NFL too. You get this dynamic duo every Tuesday. Dynamic. Yeah. This dastardly, perhaps.
I like that. Dastardly duo.
You get us on Locked On NFL. Check out the Peacock and Williamson show as well. That's another national offering from the Locked On Podcast Network. Free and available, of course, on all platforms, and your team every day.